In the pasture. One Monday morning, so early that the sun was just reddening the tops of the mountains, Stefali rushed into Vincey's room. "Wake up, Vincey, wake up quick," she called to him. "The man has taken the cows to the pond and father says as soon as we have had breakfast we must take them to the pasture so the man can go back to work. We'll take our lunch with us because it's too far to come home. Won't that be real fun? Come now, hurry." By this time Vincey was awake, but looked at his sister with his large dark eyes as though still half dreaming. "Oh, I dreamed something so beautiful," he said. "Mother and I were in Sitten. You know I was there last summer with her. We went into a church and everything was just as it looked then. An organ was playing music that was more beautiful than I can tell you." "Hurry up, Vincey, and come along. We cannot talk about organs now," urged Stefali. "Father is already sitting at the table and mother has carried in the coffee. You know if father gets cross because we do not come, it will not be any fun. Make haste," and she ran off. Vincey knew the truth of Stefali's words, so he sprang out of bed and dressed hastily. Swallowing his coffee and milk that stood at his place, he stuck his bread into his pocket before the other three had half finished their breakfast. The father watched the boy, thinking, he can hurry when going about his business. Perhaps he will turn out all right. The mother had packed the midday lunch for the children in a little basket and hung it over Vincey's shoulder. Stefali skipped along, a little switch that Vincey had carefully cut for her in her hand. She used this to urge the browsing cows along, but never did she strike them. Once outside, Vincey discovered he had left his whip in the barn and had to fetch it. Every herd boy had a switch, but only to crack it now and then so that it echoed in loud booms from the mountains. Vincey found no pleasure in his whip, so he was careless where he put it. Now he searched one corner after another, and while he hunted his father began to frown. Then Stefali darted up with it in her hand, for she remembered where her brother had put it last. Now the two set off, and the father called after them, "Look out, Vincey, that none of the cows gets across the stream," and the mother followed with her warning, "Take care not to go too near the stream where the rapids are. Now we must keep our eyes open so the cows stay in our own pasture, and we must see that Schwarzeli does not do too much frisking, for if she does not graze, she will get thin," said Stefali. Vincey followed Stefali and looked on as she carefully placed the little basket in the deepest shade. Then they both sat on the ground which had been thoroughly dried by both sun and wind. The fresh morning breeze rustled through the branches and blew over the meadow far and wide until its soughing died in the distance. Suddenly Stefali jumped up and darted off like an arrow. "Schwarzeli! Schwarzeli!" the child kept calling as she pursued the shiny black heifer which was running toward the stream, tail in the air. "Schwarzeli, wait for me," but the high-spirited creature only leaped higher and was now quite close to the stream. "If she jumps in, she will drown," thought Stefali in fright, for they had come to the dangerous place her mother had meant in her warning. "Schwarzeli! Schwarzeli!" Image 004. Suddenly the fugitive stood still and calmly awaited the arrival of her mistress. "You wicked Schwarzeli, to frighten me so!" Stefali exclaimed, grasping hold of the rope around Schwarzeli's neck. "Just wait. If you go on like this, I will bring you no more salt that you lick as though it were so much sugar." Schwarzeli rubbed her neck on Stefali's shoulder as much as to reply, "I did not mean to be bad, it was so jolly to caper over the pasture." Halfway back to the place set aside for grazing, Vincey met them and asked in great surprise, "Why did you run away all of a sudden, Stefali? I heard some lovely music 2 or 3 times, and when I turned to ask if you heard it too, I saw you coming back with Schwarzeli. Oh, it is such a pity you did not hear it. I cannot describe it. It sounded like a great choir of deep, strong voices floating over the meadow, growing always softer, like the sound of waters far away. It was so beautiful. Come, Stefali, we will sit down there again, and perhaps we can still hear it. Now go along, Schwarzeli, and be good, said Stefali as she let go the rope and followed her brother. However, she had scarcely settled down alongside him when she sprang up again, and this time Vincy with her, for the brown cow had wandered over to the boundary fence and was pushing hard against the palings to get through. The two children ran to bring the animal back, and soon the cow was wandering prudently about the proper field. Stefali discovered a spot that was especially inviting, where fragrant little wild pinks nodded happily. Come along, Vincy, we will rest here. I am sure there will be no more wonderful music under the tree. The children gazed contentedly on the sunlit landscape, and after a period of quiet enjoyment Stefali said, I would love to be a cowherd all my life, wouldn't you, Vincy? No, I would not, replied Vincy. Why not? Inquired Stefali. Surely no place is more lovely than this. Yes, that is true, Vincy admitted. But I would not like to look after cows all my life. What do you like to do best? I have not seen you do it, said Stefali, astonished to think she did not know. Most of all, I love to hear the bells peal and hear them resound through the branches of the trees and down from the mountain heights. Do you hear the soft notes around us, do you hear? And his eyes grew larger and brighter as he listened. Stefali pricked up her ears. That is only the gnats buzzing, she said in a disgusted tone. But Vincy continued, and when I hear such beautiful sounds I would like to remember them and to sing them or imitate them in some other way. I am always wondering how I can do it. But that is no profession, Stefali interrupted. Well, that is what I am afraid of, too, said Vincy in a discouraged manner, but I have to keep on thinking about it. I have cut a lot of pipes and have tried to see what I could imitate on them. I have 5 altogether. Out of one I could get deep tones, out of another high ones, and the others have middle notes. I have been thinking how I can blow on 2 or 3 at the same time so they will all sound at once, like the church bells, you know. You might be a piper, Stefali suggested suddenly, greatly elated at her inspiration. That would be a fine profession, wouldn't it? I don't know, replied Vincy, rather uncertain, but even if I could be, Father would not let me. He found my pipes in the barn one day and threw them all away, saying I must think about more useful things than collecting pipes and working on stuff that amounts to nothing. You must not be so sad about it, Vincy, she said consolingly. I am sure Father means you must not have the pipes in the barn or stable, but out here in the pasture you certainly may have them. I will watch the cows and call you when anything is the matter. You can cut new pipes, all of which we will lay in a hole under the tree, and you will take them out only when we are here. I will help you blow them. I'll blow on the high pipe and you on the low, and in that way they will sound together like the bells. Apparently this plan did not console him as she thought it would, for he kept gazing on the ground and said no more. Now we will talk about something else, she continued resolutely, for she did not like his sad expression, but before they could start talking again, she sprang from the ground and darted away, calling, Vincy, Vincy. Vincy too ran at topmost speed toward the end of the pasture where a wooden footbridge led across the stream. A party of strangers was about to cross when a little dog belonging to them suddenly dashed into the midst of the cows, barking violently. The frightened animals ran in all directions, and Schwarzeli, tail raised high, galloped hither and thither. This excited the dog to further onslaughts. Stefali ran after her cows to quiet them while Vincy struck out at the dog with his whip so that it suddenly turned tail and ran howling after the disappearing party. This had proved such a hot piece of work that the children sought the shade of the big tree and threw themselves down on the ground to get their breath. Sitting up, Vincy said, "I wish the dog had been on the other side, where the path leads up to the pasture. I saw a fiery red flower there, and it looked tremendously big, even from where I was bigger than any I ever saw. If it were not so far, I'd go and fetch it, but it is too hot." "Oh, I'll go," said Stephanie with assurance. "If it is so beautiful, it can't be too far for me." Vincy was going to offer to fetch the flower if Stephanie wished it so much, but the little girl had sped off so far, he knew he could not overtake her. So he kept his seat, and now that the midday bell in the village began to ring, he quickly forgot everything else, so intently did he listen to the sound. "There is your flower," were the words that suddenly roused him, and Stephanie laid a bright red scarf before her brother. He was so deeply buried in his thoughts that he had not noticed the flight of time, and was astonished at her quick return. He gazed thoughtfully at what he had supposed was a red flower. Where had he seen that scarf before? "Oh, now I know," he suddenly exclaimed. "I saw it hanging on the chair in which the strange little girl was sitting at Mrs. Troll's house. It must belong to her." Now Stephanie also recalled having seen something scarlet there, and as there had been children in the party that had crossed the bridge, they were probably the same children they saw yesterday. Vincy began to consider what was to be done with the scarf. He knew that whatever was found must be returned to the owner at once, therefore the best thing would be for him to run over to Mrs. Troll's house with it. But Stephanie declared it was everybody's dinner hour, and there was plenty of time to do it before evening. As soon as dinner was mentioned, Vincy suddenly sensed an immense hunger, so he set right to work gathering all the twigs under the tree and built a little fire. While it was dying down, Stephanie turned the grassy place into an attractive dinner table, laying out 2 large slices of bread spread with golden butter and 2 snow-white eggs which their mother had boiled and which now only needed peeling. Then she carried the basket near the fire and put some clean round potatoes into the glowing coals. They were soon smoking and sizzling so invitingly the children waited impatiently for the moment when they could rake them from the bed of dying ashes. When they had cooled a little they bit deeper and deeper into the snowy whiteness, though they thought the hard-baked crust really the best of all. The cows had been so busy grazing that now they were ready to rest a bit. Even Schwarzeli had settled down peacefully, though she tossed her little black head from time to time, showing she could not be trusted altogether. The children cleaned up their place under the tree, for paper and eggshells did not belong on the fine green carpet of their living room. And then they sat quietly and contentedly gazing over the pasture, enjoying the peace that was round about them. "Now I might carry back the scarf we found," said Vincy after a while. "The cows are sure to be quiet until I get back." "Yes," agreed Stephanie. "The big ones will rest for a while, and if Schwarzeli starts to run to the stream, I'll entice her back. I have kept all the salt Mother gave us for the eggs. You did not ask for any, and Schwarzeli loves it." Taking the scarf which Stephanie had folded, Vincy ran off, but it took a good quarter of an hour for him to reach Mrs. Troll's house. The front door stood open and all was quiet inside. Hearing chopping in the garden, he thought Mrs. Troll might be there, but suddenly quite different sounds attracted him so powerfully that he mounted the stairs. Through a half-open door he caught the notes of a melody. Stepping up, he laid his ear on the door to hear better, but in his longing, he pressed quite hard and the door flew wide open. Instantly the small musician who sat on a high stool before the instrument swung around and looked at him. Seeing he was quite shocked, she jumped down from the stool and ran up to him. "Oh, did you find my scarf and bring it back to me?" she asked as she caught sight of the scarlet cloth in his hand. "That is lucky for me. Miss Landrat gave me a good scolding for losing it and said that, as punishment, I must go over the same path I traveled with Papa and the other gentleman this morning and find it. Now you have brought it I do not have to go, so I will give you a reward. What would you like best?" Vincy gazed in surprise at the wonderful child who could produce such entrancing music and now speak to him as though they had been friends for a long time. He hesitated, but at last replied timidly, "Can I wish for anything I choose?" "Yes," replied his new acquaintance decidedly, "but ask for something I can give you, not such a thing as a ship or a horse." "No, I don't mean anything like that," said Vincy. "I only wish to hear the music again." "The music? Do you mean what I was playing when you came? That really is no present." "What is your name?" the little girl asked, suddenly interrupting her own line of thought. When Vincy mentioned his name, she replied, "And mine is Alida Thorneau. Practicing gets so tedious that I play one of my little pieces between exercises." "Do you have to practice too?" "What do you mean by practice?" "Oh, don't you know?" "Then you are lucky," she exclaimed. "You see, practicing is sitting still on a round stool and everlastingly running your fingers up and down on the piano. That is called playing the scale, and repeating it over and over is called finger practice." Image 005. "Oh, did you find my scarf and bring it back to me?" she asked. "Why do you have to practice?" asked Vincy in wonder. "Because one has to obey," answered Alida, "and Miss Landrat ordered me to practice from 2 to 3 o'clock every day. I have no lessons here like I do in Hamburg, but every time Papa comes down here, I have to promise again to obey my governess. You see, Papa is up at the baths with Mama because she is sick." "How did you learn to play that pretty piece?" asked Vincy, who had listened to all this with intense interest. "Oh, that is easily done when one has to practice so much. All one has to do is to play the notes that are written there," she explained. "Then you are fortunate to be able to do so much practicing," said Vincy, and he gazed at the piano with such longing that Alida suddenly remembered the reward he had asked. "Now I will play for you," she said. Vincy stared at her flying fingers in amazement, and Alida saw in the mirror above the piano how he followed her playing. That pleased her, and she repeated the spring song but stopped suddenly in the middle of it, whirled around on the stool and asked, "Would you like to learn to play the piano?" Vincy's eyes sparkled, but only for a moment. The next, he gazed at the floor and said sadly, "That I can never do." "Why, yes, you can very easily," returned Alida with conviction. "I can teach you. You will soon learn all I know, and you can practice with me. That will be much more fun than for me to sit alone. Then you can play little pieces like this one that pleases you so much." Vincy's eyes grew larger and larger with astonishment and longing. Unbelievable happiness was suddenly before him. He need only say yes. He could not grasp it. "If it pleases you, say yes quickly, that you really wish it," said Alida a little impatiently. "Then you must come here every day at 2 o'clock, like today, because then Miss Landrat takes a walk with Hugo and I have to practice until 3 o'clock or sometimes even later, until they return. So we will be quite alone and I will teach you everything." In a voice that trembled, he said, "There is nothing I would like better." "Then everything is all settled," declared Alida with satisfaction. "Come tomorrow, or would you like to start today?" Much as he would have liked it, Vincy did not dare that, for Stefali had been left alone long enough. But he would return the next day, and gladly, if it might be so. Still he could not quite believe his great good fortune, but because Alida was so sure, his doubt was conquered and he ran off in great excitement. What would Stefali think of the plan? This was his chief thought as he ran. When he reached the pasture, he saw the cows resting as he had left them, though Schwartz-Eli was wandering back and forth quietly. "It took you a long time," Stefali said. "What did she say?" Seating himself on the grass beside Stefali, Vinci related all that had happened, explaining that he had not promised definitely to go each day for the hour's practice because he must first learn what she would say about being left alone. Stefali considered for a moment, then said eagerly, "You can do it very easily, Vinci, and it will bring you great joy. I know that quite well." "I know it too," agreed Vinci, his eyes aglow. "Do you think anything might happen to the cows during that time?" "They are still quiet today." "There is nothing to worry about," his sister assured him. "All the time you were away, they lay quiet and looked around, and Schwarzeli took a little walk. That is the way it always is in the afternoon." Vinci himself knew this was true, but was glad of Stefali's assurance. There was now so much to talk over concerning the coming days and their consequences that they sat engrossed in conversation until horns sounded from here, there, everywhere. This was the signal for the herders that milking time had arrived and the cattle should be driven home. Vinci leaped up from the ground in great surprise that evening had come so quickly, and Stefali took the basket on her arm and went to fetch the wandering Schwarzeli. Her brother whistled his cows together, and then the two children gleefully marched off behind their small herd to the stable where their father awaited them.